Welcome summoners to another Wild Rift Pro Guides video. I'm sure that most of you guys know, but Wild Rift is a team game, relying on allies to follow up and coordinate in order to maximize your plays. So, in light of that, my name is Nathan Ng, and for today we'll be discussing some of the best team fighting champions in patch 2.2a. These picks excel in big skirmishes, performing their respective roles fantastically. But before we begin, today's question of the day. What champion in Wild Rift do you believe would be the best MMA fighter? In essence, when placed in a cage match 1v1, who do you think would become the greatest brawler? I think Camille would be the greatest, though it's kind of unfair because she has little knife legs, and she already has a cage built into her kit. Also, be sure to check out our Community Wild Rift Discord for a chance to join our giveaways and talk to our hosts, including me, and join the Pro Nathan cult, or the PNC. It's growing. Be a part of it, and together we can bring down Kangas, which isn't that hard to do apparently. Not in real life, because he would probably beat me up. But you know, on the Rift, I could win 1v1, so. Anyway, without having a sturdy engage or a beefy frontline, your team is often more vulnerable to enemies' offensive strategies. It's definitely possible to succeed without a tank, but undeniably, having a tank or two on your team increases your chances of winning a game. Therefore, the first couple champions will focus on some of the greatest tanks on Wild Rift. To be an effective tank on your team, you will need to be willing to take damage. That may very well sound like common sense, but this is imperative to note when discussing tank plays, since oftentimes you'll be risking your own life in places of your allies. So, the first champion up, we have the easiest champion tank to play who excels in soaking up damage, Dr. Mundo. This pick is truly the epitome of frontline tanks, capable of standing dead center in the middle of the enemy team during a fight, soaking up huge amounts of damage while damaging enemies nearby by simply existing. Thanks to his synergy with Sunfire Aegis, Dr. Mundo's DPS is pretty high. Burning Agony, his second ability, drains Dr. Mundo's health while dealing continual damage to nearby enemies. This ability stacks wonderfully with Sunfire Aegis' passive, incentivizing running up very close to his enemies. If he decides to stand far back, only throwing cleavers, this damage is cut down by more than half. So, be sure to face tank the enemy team while you're playing Dr. Mundo. Mundo's passive Adrenaline Rush alongside his ultimate Sadism grants massive amounts of health regeneration, oftentimes resulting in unkillable machete throwing machine. But once again, to make use of this skill, he needs to be taking damage. In essence, a full health Mundo has nothing to regenerate. Therefore, be sure to position in dangerous zones that other champions on your team may not be able to safely do so. But don't get us wrong, we're not telling you to run it down. Please, don't do that. But his cleavers can make it so that he can stick to his enemies really easily. Being able to follow me on Instagram and TikTok and Twitch at Nathan_ING. If you guys want to play some League of Legends with me or just watch me play some video games, definitely join my Twitch. I stream Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 6 to 8 p.m. PST. It's just a little shameless self-plug, but you know, I don't even have shame, so. Anyway, there are often advantageous positions that are too risky for other players on your team to walk up to, but they are actually quite safe for a tanky champion like Mundo. Tanks should bravely lead the charge for their team. For more great champion picks, be sure to check out our OP picks video or just look over any of our 2.2a tier lists. The next tank champion that we're going to be talking about is Jarvan IV. He's a fantastic frontliner, but provides more in regards to lockdown than survivability during fights. His signature knock-up combo, performed by using his third and first ability accordingly, creates very opportune moments of play for his allied team, throwing him amidst the enemy team while locking them down. Followed up by his ultimate Cataclysm, Jarvan is actually very capable of stalling multiple members of the enemy team while completely disregarding his own safety. The key to optimizing the Jarvan pick is exactly knowing when to go in. The factors that go into this decision are threefold. How many members of your team can realistically follow up? How many members of the enemy team are nearby? Which target is the most vulnerable? After gauging these factors, if you only believe that your team will win the trade, engage to your heart's content. Notice that whether or not you can survive the engage is not on the list of the factors to take in while engaging. Engage heavy tanks such as Jarvan should understand their pivotal role in a team fight. By diving in headfirst into the enemy team, these tanks often grant their team a very strong and reliable beginning for fights, a role that often cannot be mimicked by any other types of champions. But in doing so, tanks need to keep in mind that their lives do not always come first. The damage dealers are the ones that should be carrying the fight, while the tank should lock down the enemy team while peeling for their respective carries and creating space. In light of that, for a champion like Jarvan, utilizing your knock-up combo to protect your allies from an engage is just as important of a role as ramming into the entire enemy team. And even if these situations result in Jarvan's death, if the rest of his team succeeded thereafter, it's considered a job well done. The greatest team fighting champions aren't always the ones carrying the fight, but rather the ones that provide great utility to ensure that the fights go smoothly. Once again, we're definitely not condoning running it down. On the other side of that coin, next up we'll be discussing hyper damage carries. These champions rely on their tanks for lockdowns, following up by finishing off their enemies. The first champion up is Kaisa, who excels in dealing consistent damage. After building Runen's Hurricane, the Daughter of the Void is a true menace in teamfights, proccing her passive on multiple targets to deal overwhelming amounts of damage when fully stacked. To add onto her team fighting prowess, her ultimate allows her to dash to a nearby enemy champion that has been marked by her allies' crowd control. By abusing this ability, she's perfectly able to follow up on engages from champions such as Jarvan, increasing the playmaking potential of her team and therefore chances of victory. Thanks to the invisibility of Supercharge, Kaisa has insurance built into her kit to prevent her from being too easily caught out. Simply use the ability to create space between the enemy, while utilizing her Killer Instinct ultimate as the last resort. Unlike tanks, damage carries need survivability and escapes to help them survive during pinnacle teamfights. If they die, their team loses their damage and therefore drastically loses their chances of winning the teamfight. That's why Kaisa is one of the greatest teamfighting champions, since her kit has damage, escapes, and a follow-up all built into a single champion. Katarina is another fantastic damage carry. She utilizes her daggers and dash resets to teleport around the map, becoming an untouchable assassin. When she uses her ultimate Death Blossom, she deals, hands down, the most burst damage in the game. I'm sure we've all experienced being one-shot by the bladed assassin during a teamfight at least once. Once she acquires a kill, Katarina's cooldown on her skills reset, allowing her to snowball her momentum forward. But since she's very vulnerable to a lockdown and her body is fragile, she's truly most functional when properly coordinating with her team. Similar to Kaisa, Katarina excels in following up with her team's engages by offering excellent area effect damage. If the enemy team is locked down and Katarina is in the vicinity, she's almost definitely gonna kill them. This makes her a fantastic team fighting damage carry. Next up is Galio, a very unique champion that serves both as a tank and a damage dealer. He's truly the best of both worlds since his base stats grant him very high defensive capabilities while his skills scale extremely well with AP. But Galio differs from the typical AP carry in that his kit relies heavily on his crowd control abilities, diving forward while providing frontline for his team. Justice Punch, his third ability, lunges him forward, knocking up that first enemy champion that he encounters. Shield of Durand can be charged to increase his radius, which taunts all those around him. Those two crowd control abilities make him a force to be reckoned with, since the lockdown gives him and his teammates ample opportunity to make an aggressive play. The unique advantage that Galio has over many other champions is that after applying crowd control, he can simply deal the damage needed to execute targets by himself, utilizing his overtune ability, Winds of War. Arguably, the greatest advantage to team fights that Galio offers is through the usage of his ultimate Hero's Entrance. This flies him into an ally's aid while dealing damage and knocking up all those around his targeted ally. Since teamfights are more often than not determined by the number of champions present, Galio's near instantaneous entrance allows him to turn the tides, creating an advantageous teamfighting situation for his allies. Another champion that is similar to Galio that deals massive amounts of damage while granting his team crowd control is Gragas. This guy builds pretty much full AP and relies on his massive belly to body slam into his enemies. This ability stuns the target while dealing great damage, serving as a very effective tool for engage. In addition, Gragas' ultimate explosive cask knocks back all enemies affected by the AoE. Using this skill, Gragas is fully capable of initiating favorable fights, picking out vulnerable targets, and instantly following up with his own burst damage. Honestly, there is little to no outplay for this specific style of champion during teamfights in Wild Rift. Not only can they run in headfirst while locking down the enemy, they can deal an absurdly high amounts of damage. So pick these if your team is lacking crowd control, but simply do not want to play a self-sacrificing tank champion. The last category are Enchanter supports. Since enchanters cannot dive in and they're vulnerable to damage, they're honestly some of the worst kinds of champions in the current state of the game. They offer little in teamfights, often resorting to standing far back enough in order to stay safe from the enemy engages. If they don't do so, they can realistically get bursted down in a blink of an eye. And unless to build AP, they typically lack consistent DPS to follow up on their allies' plays. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Enchanter supports are completely useless, but this is a best team fighting champion list, and they're simply not the best, consistently outperformed by tank support champions. The only notable Enchanter support worthy of being on this list is Janna, the Storm's Fury. Janna excels in denying the enemy's plays without needing to walk up to closely impact the fight. All of her skills have a generous cast range, allowing her to shield and protect her allies very effectively from afar. Her first ability, Howling Gale, shoots out a tornado that interrupts nearly all the dashes in the game, thereby denying the enemy plays while simultaneously locking them down for the allies to capitalize on. This ability is one of the greatest support skills in the game. If the enemy manages to somehow engage, Janna's ultimate ability, Monsoon, provides emergency support, once again knocking back all enemies but also healing all allies within the area of effect. In other words, she quite literally blows you away. By keeping her allies alive and denying her enemies' plays, she thereby increases the windows of opportunity for her team to make favorable plays. As mentioned before, Enchanter supports are often forced to stand far back in order to avoid being targeted and therefore being bursted down. But this prevents them from fully impacting the fight since they cannot land their key abilities. Unlike other enchanter supports, Janna is actually rewarded for standing behind her allies, since her passive grants them bonus movement speed when they move towards her. Movement speed is essential in positioning, and positioning is essential in coordinating team fights. Definitely don't sleep on the Janna pick. In conclusion, there are many viable teamfighting roles and therefore champions that perform exceptionally well. Definitely don't think that because the champion that you play isn't on the list that they aren't great at teamfighting. After all, this is only a 12-minute or so video, so we can't possibly talk about all the great teamfighting champs. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video, and if you enjoyed the content, like and subscribe. Don't forget to address the question of the day in the comments down below, join our community Discord, and most importantly, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.